We've got some bombshell reporting from The Intercept to share with you today. Per reporting from Daniel Boguslaw, CNN journalists reporting on Israel and Palestine, whether stationed in the Middle East or the United States or elsewhere worldwide, are required to submit their work for review by CNN's bureau in Jerusalem before publication, following a long-standing policy. While CNN asserts that the policy aims to ensure accuracy in reporting on the contentious subject, it implies that a significant portion of the network's recent coverage of the Gaza conflict and its global repercussions has been influenced by journalists operating within the constraints of the country's military censor.
As highlighted in a recent report by The Intercept, the military censor has recently imposed restrictions on 8 subjects, including security cabinet meetings, information related to hostages, and also reporting on weapons seized by fighters in Gaza. Foreign reporters seeking a press pass in Israel are required to sign a document acknowledging their commitment to comply with the directives of the censor. In response to this report, a CNN spokesperson told The Intercept in an email, quote, "The policy of running stories about Israel or the Palestinians past the Jerusalem Bureau has been in place for years. It is simply down to the fact that there are many unique and complex local nuances that warrant extra scrutiny to make sure our reporting is as precise and accurate as possible."
Joining us now to discuss his reporting is investigative reporter at The Intercept, Daniel Boguslaw. Welcome to Rising.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Now, Daniel, I want you to address the explanation offered by CNN that these issues in this region are particularly sensitive. I can't imagine that there's many regions all across the world that are dealing with sensitive issues that could use, let's say, a review from a local perspective. But is this a relatively unique choice that's special to Israel-Palestine, or do we regularly see news about various subjects being routed through local bureaus in various parts of the world?
Sure. Well, I think at various bureaus, sometimes reports will be run, through a regional bureau to add reporting or, consult with a specialist to check for accuracy. What's unique about this is the policy of running every single story concerning Israel, concerning Palestine, through the Jerusalem Bureau, which, as I reported, is under the auspices of the Israeli military censor. Now, it's widely known that the Israeli military censor has existed for decades, that they issue directives and are often in contact with bureaus and newsrooms, both domestic news agencies in addition to foreign news agencies. But a policy that requires international reporters to run basic coverage by them is certainly something that's unique and something that hasn't been reported as existing at other major news organizations.
Could you describe more fully for us the process in Israel, the military censorship, and what that looks like? And obviously, it's not just CNN then that is subjected to that level of scrutiny, but all reporters who want to do business in the region.
Sure. Well, the censor outlines coverage areas which are off limits. Before the CNN report, we reported on the addition, as you mentioned, of several subjects that are off limits, matters relating to hostages being held in Gaza's health, reports about weapon systems captured by Hamas fighters. So there are these hard and fast rules that are laid out to protect against security infiltration in Israel. There are also, at times, reports submitted by news organizations directly to the censor for review. And in those cases, the censor can actually redact portions of news reports. They can literally censor them to remove lines of text. But really, through reporting on this subject, it's become clear that the way the censor functions the majority of the time is through a sort of soft power which influences self-censorship, meaning that reporters, again, whether they're domestic reporters or international reporters, begin to understand the limits of what they can do. And instead of receiving an angry phone call from the censor, which is often how they communicate with bureaus, reporters just know what the limits are, and they're not going to overextend themselves. They're not going to jeopardize their careers with their managers, with their bosses, or through legal action directly from the censor.
Yeah, this is incredible. You say you spoke to a CNN staff member who spoke to The Intercept on the condition of anonymity, who said, quote, every single Israel-Palestine related line for reporting must seek approval from the Jerusalem Bureau, or when the Bureau is not staffed, from a select few handpicked by the Bureau and senior management, from which lines are most often edited with a very specific nuance. You go on to write about some of the policies that CNN has promulgated to its staff members that have to do with how they characterize the war. Can you speak to some of those and about whether or not you think those guidelines cross the line over from editorial guidelines or kind of more structural guidelines into actually setting an editorial, an opinion direction for the outlet?
Well, I think one of the biggest concerns expressed to me from inside CNN was about timeline. Reporting facts as they're coming out in real time, and that's sort of CNN's bread and butter. And what this person expressed was that this process significantly slows down their ability to report the news as it happens. And there's a real discrepancy between news that comes out of the IDF. It evolves much faster from the official line versus any review of footage coming out direct out of Gaza, not reported by the IDF, or statements relating to the war made by Hamas officials. So what this person really expressed is that even more so than any direct editorial effect, there's a broader effect on news output, where this process just significantly slows down any report, and it creates an imbalance in the streams of information flowing into CNN and out to viewers.
So you're saying that because the IDF provides its own version of events directly to CNN, and those can be reported out quickly, as opposed to the more informal reporting channels that are coming out of Gaza with journalists who are local journalists who have been under siege, over 100 of them killed so far, that side of the reporting is delayed as compared to the reporting that's coming directly from IDF sources?
That's correct. And also, to be clear, in this report, we reported for the first time that at the onset of the war, about 10 days after October 7th, CNN actually hired a former IDF soldier out of the spokesperson's unit to basically, effectively, what seems to be serving as a conduit between the IDF and CNN for things like translation issues, for speed of contact. So again, there you see this real discrepancy where you basically have a direct line flowing in from the literal IDF spokesperson into CNN, and a system set up to speed that process, while there just wasn't a similar effort to create a streamlined review process for other streams of news, which sometimes are breaking events faster than the IDF in certain cases.
Right. CNN reporters have been at times embedded with the IDF. I can recall that one CNN reporting where a reporter has been walking through the hospital that got taken, and the IDF is showing the things that they found there. Does this influence the kind of access they're able to get, or the coverage they're able to get? And is that a reason you think they might be good with this arrangement, because it pleases the Israeli government and then they're getting more access because of it?
Well, certainly multiple outlets have agreed to submit their footage to the IDF for review before publishing. And again, this is under the auspice of protecting the operational stability of the IDF forces operating in Gaza. And I think that these are difficult choices that newsrooms have to make all over the world. You can conceive of a bureau operating in a country like China or Russia that has to weigh the challenges of reporting critically on an authoritarian government with protecting their staff and being able to maintain coverage. I think what's so unique about this is really what these internal directives and documentation seem to show is that CNN went above and beyond what other news organizations' protocols are for trying to figure out that balance. And in fact, sort of hyper insulated themselves in one sense, creating internal censor on top of the official IDF military censor to ensure that there were no incidents like what occurred at the New York Times, where a headline ran and there was an entire internal review process trying to make sure that there was safeguarding internally to attribute news sources to the Palestinian Health Authority versus the IDF, and to clarify where information was coming. I think that was a big shakeup moment for major news organizations, where the firestorm was unlike anything they had experienced in a long time. And I think there hasn't been a similar response with CNN, and maybe part of that is because these protocols have been in place for so long, and have ensured that a dust up like that hasn't ever occurred for what seems to be decades that this policy has been in place.
Yeah, I'm reminded as you're talking about when CNN reporter Sarah Snyder was forced to issue an apology for saying on air that Israel had confirmed that the now infamous 40 beheaded baby story, which of course did not happen, was in fact true. She confirmed, she got a report on air, and I think that is perhaps an indication of how a close relationship and an interrogated relationship between a news organization and people within the Israeli government can lead to exactly that kind of misinformation, which of course was spread so far that even Joe Biden repeated that was true multiple times. I also just want to speak to this other aspect that you wrote about. I mean, when we're talking about the new standards and practices that were promulgated on CNN, the pattern that I'm getting from your reporting here is that there is a push to make sure that all evidence, all news that is being reported locally or from Hamas-affiliated sources are characterized exactly in that way, to frame all of the death tolls and things like that as these are Hamas numbers. I think the implication of that is pretty obvious, whereas the same is not true of identifying or the implications of identifying numbers as coming from the Israeli government, even if there has been a pattern of misinformation, whether it's about 40 beheaded babies or whether or not they were responsible for killing Shireen Abdul Akla, and on and on and on. Is that right, that people were told, you write, if it's senior Hamas, they were told if a senior Hamas official makes a claim or a threat that is editorially relevant, such as changing their messaging or trying to write events, we can use it only if it's accompanied by greater context. Hamas representatives are engaging in inflammatory rhetoric and propaganda. Most of it has been said many times before and is not newsworthy. What part of that did you find most striking?
Well, honestly, I mean, I find the greatest irony pairing that directive next to the history of the IDF spokesperson's unit, out of which a reporter was hired at the onset of the war. I mean, this is a unit that was forced to apologize for conducting psychological operations, psyops, against Israeli citizens. So, the notion that they will issue a directive like this alongside the hiring of someone out of a state body that has been forced to apologize to its own citizens for bending the news and creating fake social media accounts suggests that there should be if not equivalent, at least greater couching of information coming out of the IDF and informing readers about the history of psychological operations from that unit, and the fact that the IDF's own numbers are not always credible as well.
Daniel Boguslaw, thank you so much for joining us today on Rising. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.